Nathan Gilmour again. Alright, so you've got all 6 of your sources, all 8 of them really, 2 primary, 6 secondary. You've got a stack of note cards this tall, ready to roll. What are you going to do with them? Well, the answer is you've got to put some kind of structure to your paper. Now, for those of you who have forgotten a little bit about what you learned back in English 101, 102, I'm going to talk through some of the possibilities you have for putting together a paper. Now, when we organize a big text, 6 to 8 pages is relatively big, we need to have some kind of intelligible way to get from point A to point B. Alright? So, you have a couple options that would work pretty well for this sort of paper. One of them is going to start with big general principles and work towards demonstrating that specific details work out within those big structures. Alright? So, for instance, if you did your research on John Donne, on your profession, on the Bible, on those sorts of things, and you discover that really the strongest thought you have is this big idea about what it means to be a Christian in the world, then what you'd probably want to do is lead off your paper with that big idea, and then as you work your way through, as you work on towards the end of your project, start talking about how some of the particular things you do, or you will do, I keep using music minister as an example, so I'll keep using it. As a music minister, as a youth minister, as a business person, as an accountant. How do those particular practices fit into the big idea you've already established? Alright? When we move from general to particular, we call that a deductive argument. It's one of the valid forms of explanation, and it'll make sense to your reader because in that movement from general on one end of your paper to particular on the other end of your paper, your reader will be able to follow along how the pieces fit together. You'll still want to use some transitions to fit the pieces together. You'll still want to think about your topic sentences, and you'll still want to revise after you're done so that it's as clear as humanly possible for your reader. But this is one way to think about it. The other possibility starts with the particular details and works towards a conclusion based on the patterns you find in the details, and we call that an inductive structure. So, just to give you an example, if in your research you're looking around and you're finding these things that seem important, but you're not quite sure what to do with them yet, alright? Facts about how John Donne conducted his life as a preacher, facts about what it meant to be a lawyer in those days, facts about some of the laws that John Donne cites in his text. Another way, it's not the only 2 ways, another way that you can organize the material there in your paper is to start with an explanation of these details and then work towards an explanation of the big pattern that they form. Like I said, we call that an inductive argument. It starts with particular details, works towards a general conclusion. And that's going to be more useful than the deductive in certain kinds of papers. Now, you might ask, which one of these should I use in my paper? And I have a couple answers for you. Number 1 is, you are the writer, so it's ultimately your choice, it's ultimately your responsibility. What this means is you might want to do some thought experiments where you outline a couple different papers, take a look at the 2 outlines and see which one is more compelling in outline form. Another possibility, and this is one that I definitely recommend, is that when you've got it drafted, when you've got your 6 to 8 pages written, have someone take a look at it and ask, alright, where do you think the strongest part of my paper is? If the strongest part is in the right place, it's going to strike your reader as reading well. If something seems off, you might want to think about trying a different organizational principle. Alright? Now, as far as working the research in, one thing that I always try to encourage people to do is to work the research into all parts of the paper. In other words, don't start out with research in your first part and then go to just your own arguments in the second part. Vice versa, don't start out with your own arguments, then go to the research. And by no means start your paper with source number 1, then source number 2, then source number 3, 1 paragraph per source. That's not your argument, that's just a catalog. Alright? What I want you to do is to think about, how does my material flow most sensibly? Like I said before, and I'll say this one more time and then I'll cut out and get ready for the next clip. If your strong suit is forming a general theory about how things fit together, Lead off with that and then demonstrate how particular moments in the profession you're imagining are going to fit into that paradigm. That's deductive structure. If, on the other hand, your strong suit is finding lots and lots of details and then discerning patterns in them that lead you to conclusions, that means you ought to write an inductive paper. Start with your particulars, work towards the general. Either way, run some drafts by your instructor, ask questions, use the people in your class as resources. You all ought to be thinking about this well ahead of time, writing well ahead of time. If you do these things ahead of time, things will turn out better. Now the next clip is going to get a little bit more nuts and bolts. We're going to talk about the sources that you use, how you use them, working them into your paper, working them into a sentence. Until then, I'll see you on the other side of the mouse click.